In the early 70s, EMS started to emerge in the fire service and in public safety. And we were involved in that just as a movement in the fire service. It was kind of interesting in Phoenix. We had almost 200 firefighters that on their own time and on their own schedule actually became EMTs. So actually the members of the Phoenix Fire Department led us into EMS. There was an interesting change for us because it was very non-traditional. There was not in Arizona any enabling legislation that really provided for advanced life support, and we started that along with some of the people in the community who, in both the medical and in the legislative community, that helped us with that. And started the first program, as you mentioned, Jim, in 1974. We had 12 Phoenix firefighters who went through that program. We operated one vehicle, which was Rescue 1 in those days for the Phoenix Fire Department. And most of those medics, those 12 medics, continued throughout their whole career to deliver advanced life support. In fact, 2 or 3 of them are still in the Phoenix Fire Department and still are certified as paramedics. Obviously very experienced, very respected folks in the system. I think what we started to do here a few years ago is we read her whole letter. And the letter that we received from the customer after they sort of get back in business and they want to thank us for what we did, and most of those letters, the vast majority of them are very, very positive. And they say 3 things. They say you responded quickly, which is always a surprise when you're getting service today, no matter where it is. They say you did your job skillfully, and then they write a page and a half about how nice you are. And I use myself as the example, is that I read those letters for 20 years, and what I looked for was fast and effective. I really didn't have much training or socialization or really capability to read the nice part. Well, one day I read the whole letter, and I got to thinking about it. As Mrs. Smith has never really written us a letter and been very definitive in thanking us about what the fire trucks look like, or thanked us for using the right gauge needle when we did IV therapy. So when you sort of stand back from that, you say, you know, she really thinks about more the way she was treated in the sense of the memory that she has of us than the technical part. And we can plug ourselves into that. Most of the time when we receive a technical service, a lot of times we really don't understand the details of it, but what you remember is the way you were treated. And really it isn't any more complicated than that. And really I think that we had operated historically, and I think we still do, on the goodwill and sort of the values of the people who deliver the service, who are typically terrific people, who their mothers taught them to be nice. And I think what we've started to do more in the fire service is that we just sort of authorized that and empowered people just to do what their mom told them to do when they were little. Now for us, I think as managers, it's interesting to sort of look at the challenge there is for bosses. Because for a lot of us, and certainly you and I came in the fire service at a period of time when we were mostly geared to do manual labor. So you could run the American Fire Service like it was a construction company. Well, when you start asking your firefighters or the people who work for you to be nice to people, then you've got to manage the place a little bit different. So I think it's called upon bosses to sort of create a different set of sort of boss behaviors. And that's been an interesting shift too. And I think the fire service actually is having a lot of fun with customer service. Probably the easiest change we ever made, because our mothers really did the front end work for us. And when I first became a firefighter, we called the people who received our service victims. And I probably wrote and said and lectured and just blabbed about victims for 25 years and probably wrote it 1,000 times. One day we had a little reality therapy, and somebody said, you know, I've put myself in the position because I've lived through being in a customer service situation where I was victimized. That really isn't very pleasant. So just over a period of, I don't know, it's probably 5 or 6 years, we sort of worked victim out and customer in. Now, it was a little bit disoriented to us, and a lot of our colleagues said, I don't know if we ought to call those people customers. And some of them actually said, I had people write me letters when I started kind of blabbing about this stuff. They said, you shouldn't call them customers because customers are people who actually pay for a service. You say, think about what you just said. And we sort of caught ourselves in that. So it was an interesting period. But I think for the last 4 or 5 years, we have just sort of worked into our mentality and the vocabulary that the people who receive our service are customers. Now, it changes our business in a very special way, because if we talk about the people on the outside, as customers. You got to balance that out on the inside and call the people who deliver that service our inside customers. Now, I've been in the fire service 45 years, and we used to call the people on the outside victims, and believe me, the way we managed the American Fire Service in a way 45 years ago, the people on the inside were victims too. So it's been interesting for us, it's kind of reality therapy to say you're going to have to balance the inside and the outside. So if you want the people on the inside to be nice to the people on the outside, then we got to start being nice to the people on the inside. And what that means is pretty simple. It means you got to treat them with patience, consideration, kindness, and so on. In other words, it isn't real complicated, but it's been an interesting shift for us to say what gets acted out on the inside gets delivered on the outside. So I've got to characterize to the workers by the way I treat them in very authentic terms, the way I want them to treat the Smith family on the outside. So it's been an interesting shift. It was, again, and we said it before, it's the easiest thing we've ever done because everybody came with pretty good socialization from their mothers. And we've said, just call your mother and ask your mother what you ought to do. Don't call a crazy old fire chief. Because your mother will tell you to do the same thing. Just be nice. So it's been a pretty interesting shift for us too. But yeah, the word has really created, I think, an interesting discussion.